most of the time people who are in the throes of addiction and who are down and who are not doing well with their mental health aren't really looking for access to treatment. They're usually looking for the basic necessities, which is housing, shelter, belonging.
Hello, I'm Eric Anderson. The voice you just heard belongs to Jordan Mills. Jordan, along with Priscilla Johnstone and Chelsea Fulton, are the featured guests in Season 4, Episode 1 of YXE Underground. Having a safe place to call home is something most of us take for granted, but for some people in Saskatoon, it is a constant struggle finding a safe and affordable place to call home. In this episode of YXE Underground, we'll meet 3 people who are making a difference when it comes to helping the homeless find a home here in Saskatoon. Welcome to Season 4 of YXE Underground. I hope you had a wonderful and safe summer, and thank you for continuing to support the podcast. I am really excited to share this episode with you as it's been a few months in the making. Throughout the past 3 seasons of the podcast, one of the themes that has popped up again and again has been the lack of safe and affordable homes here in Saskatoon. It connects to issues relating to mental health and addictions, and right now, affordable housing has become a federal election issue. What I struggled with was finding a way to reflect this important issue here on the podcast. Luckily, I received an email this summer from Sherry Benson. Sherry is the CEO of the United Way in Saskatoon and suggested that I do an episode on safe and affordable housing. And I was like, yes, I should, Sherry Benson. So we met for lunch in July and came up with 3 people who we thought were making a difference in the city and could bring unique perspectives to the issue. Those 3 people were Jordan Mills, Chelsea Fulton, and Priscilla Johnstone. So let's start with Priscilla. Priscilla is the Homelessness Action Plan Manager with the Saskatoon Housing Initiatives Partnership. In her role, she works with community organizations to deliver funding for various housing projects. Priscilla also works directly with Saskatoon's homeless population and does so through an Indigenous lens, which she talks about in great depth in our conversation. Priscilla is incredibly passionate and kind and has ideas on how local organizations can come together to help those looking for a home. I met Priscilla in her office at Station 20 West and started our conversation by asking if she saw her life heading towards the path of working with homeless people.
It wasn't something that I had set out in my career to move into, but now that I kind of look back at my life and all the other careers that I have had, because I've worked, in the health region for 10 years. I've worked with Ministry of Social Services for a few years. Worked with the Needle Exchange Program. Also worked in policing for about 8.5 years. So when I moved back to Saskatoon, I was working in the health center. So I worked in that field for about less than a year. And I left that place and came to SHIP. And I found that all of the experiences I've had in my past all served as a foundation of all the barriers, and organizations that people, access services to. So I found that I had, a large variety of knowledge surrounding just those basic services that people can seek. At the same time, also my own circumstances from my childhood, right, and seeking some of those supports. So when I was a child, we weren't very affluent. We were very poor, so we had to seek a lot of the services that were provided in the community. So having that firsthand knowledge, of needing supports and having those supports available. So I think that has afforded me, I'm very humble to be in this position, but I'm also very grateful and thankful that I could actually help and support others who have gone through similar things like myself when I was a when I was a kid and a single parent and struggling. So
Does all that give you empathy in terms of what people are going through right now that are struggling to find a home?
oh, big time. Big time. I'm going to be honest. There are some times I go home and I'm so frustrated, just in regards to some of the barriers that some people face. Other times I feel so selfish sometimes in regards to things that I take for granted that others may not have. So it's extremely humbling. But at the same time, I wear my heart on my sleeve sometimes, and sometimes it really affects my compassion level and just kind of hits home a little bit too hard sometimes. But I think anybody who works in this sector at times faces the same problems, or else we wouldn't be in this sector in the first place, right? So I think you have to have a level of empathy and compassion and understanding to work. And I think if you didn't, it would be, I think, more harder for you.
You mentioned some of the challenges and problems that people in our community are facing. Can you, Priscilla, just expand on that a little bit? When it comes to finding a safe and affordable home for people in Saskatoon that are struggling, what are some of the challenges that they are facing?
I think one of the biggest barriers that people are facing right now is the affordability. Right now, the aftermarket costs for private dwellings, the amount is anywhere from, you can get a bachelor suite from anywhere from $700 up to $1,500. The same time, one bedrooms anywhere from 1,000 upwards. So that cost is out of reach for most of the population. The same time, Ministry of Social Services basic supports, I think there has been some decreases in regards to the basic allowance for shelter. So a lot of people are faced with uncertainty in regards to being able to provide secure or to even obtain secure housing. The other piece is affordable housing units. I don't think we have enough in the city. At the same time, we're also dealing with dealing with a pandemic. So it's extremely difficult in regards to social distancing guidelines. There's also barriers in regards to accessing viewings, or a lot of the application process for for housing entities has gone to online platforms. So most of our homeless population don't have access to computer. They don't have a phone. Some of them don't have automatic banking or addresses. All those basic things that we take for granted when an individual is trying to seek housing. Just to fill out the application, you need to have all that information in there, right? An address, a banking account, right? Landlord references. Most people don't have any of that. So all those little tiny barriers add up to more and more and more, and it just makes it more difficult for our homeless population to have to jump through those hoops in order for them to secure housing. Once they do get secure housing, then you run into issues to maintain the home. Right? So then you run into issues such as, if they have addiction issues, if they violate the terms of their lease agreements, and then they run into situations where they're evicted. So then the cycle just repeats itself over and over and over again. So it's extremely difficult.
I'm wondering then, Priscilla, where do you and the organization SHIP, where do you come in terms of helping those that are looking for a home, or kind of like you said, in that cycle? Where do you come in for that?
Well, there's two pieces. So we come from the funding allocation piece in regards to support our community organizations, and that's anywhere from service provision to capital expenditures. So there's a variety of supports in regards to that realm. We also have 2 housing case managers that work extensively with clients. So clients will work with our housing case managers to secure housing. So individuals that come in that face barriers in regards just to the application process, those housing case managers will work with them to complete the actual application, and also will go with them for viewing apartments or houses. And they will also support them for a period up to 3 months, so that there's level of supports and guidance for that individual. That program, though, is very short. The funding will be done at the end of the year. But there are other programs in the community that also offer the same types of supports and services. I think in Saskatoon we do extremely well in regards to providing supports. Monday to Friday, we do very, very well, right? There's a lot of community organizations. We fall short a little bit in regards to our evening supports as well as our weekend supports. I think if those certain community supports, I think if they were to ramp up a little bit more, I think we would do very, very well in regards to providing the supports. We'll still run into issues of affordable housing units for individuals to be housed. Those will always be a problem. There'll always be an issue in regards to affordable housing units because we just don't have enough. We need more housing stock. At the same time, there'll always be some problems in regards to aftermarket housing and that affordability. So there'll still be a divide there, but I think moving forward, I think we could start bridging some of those gaps and work together more collectively. So I think we're doing well so far, but in anything, you could always do better.
It's nice to hear you say that that it's that we are doing well, because I think sometimes I think that, and it's not just for this issue, but for other issues, it's like, oh my gosh, like how are things ever going to improve and that kind of stuff. But is part of the battle just like you said, like sort of the mindset of approaching an issue in terms of the right mindset and thinking, okay, there's challenges obviously, but this is what we're doing well, and then here's where we can improve.
I agree. I think if we have more conversations in regards to talking about the good things that we have done well, but always leaving with a perspective that we could always do better, and then start strategically planning and moving forward on how to make that particular program or that initiative a little better. I think sometimes we stumble on the pieces of the negative realms in regards to things that we haven't done thus far, and we get caught up in that realm that we don't pay attention to the successful things that we have done. I think with the pandemic, everybody on the planet is facing some sort of adversity in regards to employment, housing, even just the family dynamics. So I think we just need to collaborate more, communicate more, and be more action orientated in regards to planning and how can we actually fix the problem. I think we've got a lot of wonderful, smart individuals that work within the housing sector, or even in the community organizations that have been doing this type of work for a long, long time. Those would be our experts in regards to how do we change and how do we adapt, how do we move forward. I just feel that we need more collaboration and consultation and getting on the same team.
Yeah. Priscilla, from your perspective, is there one key piece of the puzzle that you would like to see, like our community really focus on, that could maybe make a big difference? That's a big question, I know.
Yeah, that is a big, big question. I think from my perspective is if we had a clear objective and goal, and if we all came together for the same collective, and I think if we embraced needs and acknowledge barriers that do exist, right? I think that if we were very honest and goal orientated and focused on actually finding a solution or how to work within some of those barriers, I think we would do very well. I think at the same time, if we had more Indigenous consultation, I think if we also had more support and involvement with some of our, with our new immigrants and new people that come to the community, I think if we attack the solution with a variety of people with a variety of skill sets, ethnicities, and we all come together for the same collective on how can we mitigate and move together to eradicate homelessness. I really think that we could come up with some wonderful solutions, because we already do great work, like I said, in regards to the community. We all, like, Saskatoon is such a wonderful place to live. It's got a great community. We all band together collectively. I think if we just tap into that strength and just expand on it, I think we'd do very well.
I was reading a really lovely article about you, and I loved it. There was a part in the article that talked about how you are in your role right now sort of viewing everything through an Indigenous lens, and I thought that was really interesting. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why that is important for you, not only for the issues that our community is facing, but just for you personally.
Myself, from an Indigenous lens. So, myself growing up, we had lost our language. So my mother didn't teach us our language. So my mother had gone to residential school and my father had gone to day school. So there was a lot of cycles of historical trauma that impacted our family growing up. So it caused a lot of barriers. So one thing that I learned during that time frame, kind of moving forward in my life, is from an early age seeking supports from counselors and knowing that there's a way that you could talk with somebody if there's issues that you're being impacted with. So I grew from that perspective, and then, as I started reaching into my teens and adult years, I started doing a lot of inner work in regards to just who I was, right? So I took the realm from the Western way in regards to therapy, counseling, supports, going through that realm. And then I went into school, went into addictions counseling, so learned the disease model of addictions and just those cycles of addictions and, learned behavior and stuff like that. Then as I started growing into my 20s, 30s, then I started to learn more about my cultural ways and my cultural connections. And then during that time, I really started to realize that cultural piece was always within me because of cultural teachings that I had from a child, right? Like my father was a trapper. We lived on the land, but I didn't pay much attention to it when I was a kid growing up. I just thought it was reality, right? But then as I started getting older, I was like, well, I already had those teachings, but I didn't even realize I had those teachings, if that makes sense. And then as I started growing a little older, when I got into policing, actually, is when I really started to get back into my cultural perspective. And I first took part in a Sundance where it's 4 days you sacrifice yourself. You don't eat or drink anything for 4 days, and it's like a spiritual quest. So I took part in that, and it was very empowering, and just being in a position where you just all of your luxuries in regards to life, right? Like your basic ability to go to the tap and get water, right? Or go to the fridge and get some food, right? And all of those things that we kind of take for granted, and you live without it for a period of time, it really humbles you in regards to where you need to go, right? So I started growing from there and having more of that cultural perspective, and then start looking at things and my spirituality from that cultural lens. So then coming back now and where I'm currently at, I realized that in order to work with our homeless population, because according to our 2018 point in time count, we've got about 85% of our homelessness population are of Indigenous descent. So what I learned from my own journey is if you don't have a strong connection to your identity or your culture, or from your place of birth or environment, right, your childhood environment, when you lose that connection of where you belong. And I found myself that belonging and everything that I've done in my life is what held me together in regards to, you know, crises and things like that that I've experienced throughout my life. So that's that perspective of having that Indigenous lens, is having that connection of where your roots are, where you come from, who your people are, and keeping that identity strong within yourself and moving forward. So some of our community organizations, I think it's Saskatoon Tribal Council, really talks about the perspective that some of the homeless population of Indigenous descent, they talk to them in regards to my relatives. So it'd be the same perspective. Indigenous culture is, I mean, the Indigenous society is very small. Everybody knows of somebody, or knows somebody's somebody. So it's extremely connected. And sometimes you learn a lot in regards to the community of where your people are from. You may not know them, but they will know your relatives. They'll know your extended family. And in that brings in a sense of familiarity. And then, like, I go back as well in regards to some of the things I've learned about my family. When I was struggling with teenage years and stuff like that, you know, we all struggle in teenage years. I had done some research at school in regards to my family. So I learned from my family lineage on my father's side that we're actually related and direct descendants from Chief Mr. Wasis. And I didn't know that. But finding all of that history in regards to the chief and the Louis L Rebellion, and all of the things that were happening during the signing of treaty, really instilled a huge level of pride within who I was, and helped me realize that you have a choice in regards to your life and where you want to go. But having that direct connection and understanding that was mind-blowing. And that's what really helps me in regards to my understanding from that Indigenous lens, is that our Indigenous people, I know right now a lot of our Indigenous people are struggling with addictions and traumas, but we also have a strong, beautiful culture that is there that we just haven't been able to tap into. So I find that if we come from an Indigenous lens and allow and open that ability for individuals to reconnect with where they come from, that could be a stepping stone for them to move forward in regards to their direction and change the way that their life is, right? Or change a trajectory in some way. And I think of it from my growth and the things that I've learned. So we just, I think as a society, need to understand that there is strength, you know, in the culture and in identity. And every ethnicity has values and beliefs, right? And I'm not knocking anyone else's. I believe everyone has a right to believe in what they want, right? That's their own choice. I just think right now our Indigenous population is struggling, and we need to help and support the best way we can. Sorry, I blabbed a lot.
No, I was just about to thank you for that. That was a really thoughtful answer, and I appreciate you opening up about your past and how you have come to know things. That was a really wonderful answer. I'm so curious too. Do you, when you are working with people, then are you able to, like, do you share your own experiences?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
All the time. So I share my experiences. I mean, I had a baby at a very young age. I lived on social assistance for a period of time. I lived in affordable housing for a period of time as well. So I understand as well the cycle is sometimes you can easily get wrapped up into it. And you've got to have a lot of hard work and desire to change the way that the trajectory of your life is and make those changes. And sometimes it's difficult. It's very hard to break free from a cycle or a way of doing things that you've learned your whole life. It's extremely difficult. So I've had to go through a lot of hoops. I've had to go through a lot of struggles, and sometimes I was by myself having to go through that. But I found that each trial and tribulation I went through was kind of strength within me to kind of keep moving forward. So I share all that stuff with everyone that I come across, and just say, I've been there when you're at, right? And I would share little tricks of the trades and things that I've done in order to overcome some of that stuff, right? I really try to encourage individuals to go back to school or to try and work. I've even offered, if they need some extra supports on how to mitigate some of those and how to seek full-time employment or how to get into school, I've asked them to come back, and I try to help the best way that I can. So, but I mean, everybody does that in community, right? They all do a little bit here, a little bit there. And that's the stuff that I think we need to do a little bit more of in regards to our homeless population. Sometimes it's not that they need a handout, they just need a hand up.
You are listening to Season 4, Episode 1 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. In this episode, we are looking at safe and affordable housing in Saskatoon and speaking with people who are making a difference on this issue. You can follow and listen to YXE Underground on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. And you can also visit the website, yxeunderground.com, to hear every single episode. Don't forget to follow the podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you like what you hear, please feel free to leave a glowing review. In 2014, Jordan Mills helped to start a really innovative housing initiative called Housing First. Jordan was seeing homeless people struggle to find a place to call home while dealing with addiction and mental health issues. He knew something had to change. The idea of Housing First is that instead of a homeless person climbing a staircase of addiction or mental health treatments before reaching the top and then receiving help to find a home, you flip it on its head and you work with the person to find a safe and affordable home first. Then you can begin addressing their mental health or addiction issues. It's a really unique program that continues to have a positive impact in our community, and I was fortunate to sit down with Jordan to learn more about it. Jordan is the Director of Clinical Services at Saskatoon Crisis Intervention Services, and after spending 5 minutes with him, it's easy to feel how much he cares about helping people in our community. We met at Citizen Cafe for a coffee, and I started by asking how he goes about finding people a home.
Going back to 2014, the United Way went out on a branch, and they funded a Housing First program, and that was with our organization, with Crisis. And it was, it started very, very small. It was 2 or 3 people, really. But Housing First was a different way of looking at the issue of homelessness. So I would say prior to that, homelessness was really seen, and this is nationally, as the response to homelessness was more about maintaining it, right? So if a lot of organizations that meant well and were trying to alleviate the suffering of people who were homeless, like for example, often churches or faith groups, would run things like soup kitchens and make lunches for people experiencing homelessness, and sort of just make the experience of being homeless less difficult. And so all very good and well-intentioned things, but it didn't it wasn't a response that could end homelessness, right? It wasn't a response that could change the narrative to an assertive approach that we're going to say we're not going to maintain the issue anymore, we're going to target it and try to end it. So the concept of Housing First came out with the Mental Health Commission of Canada and that research study that started back in 2010, I believe. And the idea with Housing First, of course, being instead of having someone ascend a staircase of skills development and addictions treatment and mental health treatment before they could sort of graduate out of shelter and have a home, is that we'd flip it right on its head and say the first thing we're going to do is we can recognize right now that you're homeless. Would you like a safe place to live? Yes, I would. And then we would say, where would you like to live? Because we don't want to plunk you somewhere that you're not going to feel safe. We're going to offer you some choice and try to figure out, collaborate with you. Like where is a place you want to actually be in that you can reassemble your life. And so that's a very different way of looking at the problem. And that is sort of the backbone of Housing First. And so Housing First, so we started that program with Crisis in 2014, and like I say, it's just really changed the way that we've provided the intervention, the way we thought about the work.
Because you're right, it totally flips it on its head. What was the response like when that first started?
You know, I think people were mixed. I think people who had been doing the work for a long time in the industry were skeptical and concerned that, maybe that their way of working or their organizational outcomes weren't going to be validated anymore. But we also had people that were excited. It was kind of a fun time, and when we started out, it was a lot of fun. I remember I got to be the team leader of the first Housing First program in the province, and when we first started, there was a small, short period of time where we hadn't been sort of bombarded yet with referrals and intakes. Nobody really knew what we were up to, but we were out there starting. And so we literally had the opportunity to go into the center of the city and, out on the street and very, freely approach people that were clearly homeless and having a difficult time and simply say, it looks like you're having a hard time. Would you like a place to live? And that experience was really, really fun, really, really cool. And if, for someone like myself who's a social worker and who, works in a field where you don't always see results and outcomes, this was so much more tangible, so much more palatable, and so much more concrete to understand, like, we're offering something that someone actually wants, and we're going to do this thing together, and we're going to see some results. And so that was just really refreshing.
So, like, what was going through your mind then when you were approaching someone who obviously needed some help, and you just laid that offer out? What was that like?
Kind of, just like maybe a little bit exhilarating, really, because that it's going to be challenging. It's not going to be as simple as just here's a place to live and everything's done. And I knew that. But also, I think working in this field, there's so many programs. And when I think about like health, for example, and government programs particularly, that are offering help with an end game of sort of treatment, right? And so, the question is often to service users, do you want help accessing medications or psychiatry, for example, or on the path to a treatment center or something like that for your substance use issues? And so to be able to offer something that people actually wanted was really, really, really rewarding, because most of the time people who are in the throes of addiction and who are down and who are not doing well with their mental health aren't really looking for access to treatment. They're usually looking for the basic necessities, which is housing, shelter, belonging, intimacy with people, other people, relationships, and connecting with their family, and getting those basic needs met, and then thinking about, well, maybe it's time to look at my methamphetamine use habits or whatever it is. But so we stick to that. I mean, I still think that that's the best way to offer service is what is it that you really want, and let's collaborate on that. And most of the time with of course the clientele that we're working with and the population that we target, most of the time the biggest piece, the most obvious piece is I want a safe place to be, and I want to pick where that's going to be. I don't want you to plot me in some group home or some dump near the airport where I'm not near my resources or my pharmacy or whatever I need. I want to pick where I want to live. And so to be able to do that, that's just such a powerful way to start the work.
I'm just thinking about where I work at Sherbrooke. We follow something called the Eden Alternative Philosophy of Care, and within that we have 7 domains of well-being when it comes to our residents that live there, and 2 of them are autonomy and security, and that just links perfectly with that. Like people want that, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And I find that when people, the more choice and more autonomy that they have, the more that they're driving their own ambitions, their own sort of quote-unquote care plan, I guess if you could call it. And you're going to see outcomes when the individual's driving their own goals, right? It's what they want. And so really in this work, it's a reframing of, we're not offering services with an end game of what the system wants for them. It's really getting rid of that concept and saying, what is it you want? And we're here to collaborate with you on your terms about how we're going to walk together and try and support you in that.
That's so interesting. You mentioned when it first launched, there was that brief period where you weren't bombarded with referrals and you had the time. I'm curious, how has the program developed now? I guess that's 7 years later. How has it grown?
Oh, it's growing in so many ways, and it's exciting. Honestly, it's been such a good thing for the United Way to have invested in, because it's really, the way I see it is, it's really a tried and true program that we've done to fidelity. And some other things I have to credit the United Way for is that when we started going, like when we got this thing going, they were really good to make sure that they had the right professionals and leaders come in to help us set up. So Ian DeYoung and Samson Barris were both part of our setup, who are some of the sort of biggest leaders in this work over the last 10 years. And so when I say fidelity to the model, there's a lot to this work. It's not just big hearts and we're going to try and house people. It really is a clinical program. It takes a lot of skilled work, really, really skilled people to do this. And it also takes a framework that you have to adhere to. You can't have slippage or it doesn't work. And so we had the benefit with the support of the United Way to really make sure that we launched it in a way that adhered to fidelity, and that's been so important to how we work and how we keep working, and to the development and the evolution of what we've done. So I think when I mentioned we started with 3 people, including our team leader, after a couple of weeks the word got out, and within 2 weeks we had close to 100 referrals, and I had these pile of 100 referrals sitting on my desk, and every one of them was a legitimate referral we could have taken. And so I quickly realized at how overwhelmed the system was, and the fact that we had clearly over 100 people that had complicated health and mental health issues and chronic homelessness. And so all we could do was try to sift through and stick to the principle that we would try and find the most vulnerable. And we have a triage tool that we do reference to try and figure out the comorbid factors that would make their acuity more complicated and sort of the hardest to house, hardest to engage. And that fit with the service delivery that we were already doing. And so that's what we stuck with. And so we would pick those out of the pile. And sometimes that would even involve scouring our database and stuff to see who was the highest user of crisis services and police services, and looking at those things as well to see like what kind of sort of chaos and were they up to in the community, and so that's how we've sort of targeted who we work with, and we've kept with that. But over the years we were confronted with, because prior to Housing First we were providing service, case management service, sort of this intensive service coordination for people primarily who had severe and persistent mental illness. So a very highly involved psychiatric model that had a lot of linkages with psychiatry, and for people like where substance abuse was severe and present as well, and homelessness for sure. But like really, it was more about targeting the mental health end of things. And so what was different about this is that we now had a stream of service to add on Housing First that was targeting individuals where the primary presenting issue was chronic homelessness, and we worked backwards from there. And so it opened us up to a different sort of cohort of people that we hadn't had as much exposure to prior. And one of those areas is individuals that presented with alcohol use disorder, severe alcohol use disorder. And it was often individuals we were finding who were in their usually sort of late 40s, early 50s, sometimes as old as 60, often Indigenous, who had been through some residential school experiences or had been living with the consequences of residential schools, and severe histories of trauma, like severe histories of trauma, and had been drinking non-palatable alcohol like hand sanitizer and stuff like that for many years. And a lot of these individuals were well known to the community in terms of using resources like the Friendship Inn and sometimes the detox unit. The police were very well aware of them, but there wasn't a fit for them necessarily in terms of housing, because the need to continue to drink sort of precluded the conditions of most housing programs, including even being in the shelters. And so these individuals were high users of like emergency departments, inpatient kind of care, lots of seizures, very dangerous withdrawal stuff with alcohol use like that. And we were finding that our approach, which was at the time primarily called scattered site housing, which is when you offer someone market rental housing in the community, they sort of have a choice of where they want to live, and we support them intensively through their independent living in the market. Well, we were trying that, and we weren't having a ton of success with this particular cohort in that model. And I think for a number of reasons, but I actually think it was in some ways more dangerous, because where there may have been eyes laid on them, if there was a seizure or something, now we were finding that there was less eyes on them because they had their own place. They often weren't showing that they were making use of stuff like their kitchen and groceries in a way that was actually nourishing them. And they were also used to living communally. That's how they keep safe, right? And that was their social network. And so that doesn't work well in the concept of market rental housing, where people want you to be quiet and they want tenants to sort of, go in and out of the hallway quickly and not make too much noise. While we were seeing groups of, 9 or 10 people coming together to live in these units and all the stuff that came with that. And so we weren't happy. We were confronted. We weren't happy with the way our service model was serving that particular demographic. Outside of that, it was working wonders, particularly for people who had primarily mental health problems, and we were making the proper linkages with psychiatry and medications and helping them along their way that way. But this was different. So the response to that was, we knew we needed to do something different. We took advantage of some extra money that had come at the time through the Reaching Home, through the feds at that time. And we partnered with the Lighthouse on something very intentional to do managed alcohol. So we would try something very new to the province. It was the first time it was done here, and of course in Saskatchewan, with the history of prohibition, everything, it was a little bit, I think it raised some eyebrows. But we decided we wanted to go out and do this very different thing that would meet the need, and that if we couldn't do that, we weren't going to do it at all, because we wanted to do something that we knew was actually going to meet the needs of this population. And so we started a pilot where we were offering beverage alcohol to individuals who presented with this criteria. And in turn, they would have a safe place to live. They would have their own unit. They would have a communal space to socialize with each other. And we would have a regulated dose of beverage alcohol that was safer than some of the stuff they were getting on the street, like hand sanitizer, mouthwash. And we would work on them with their choice of what they wanted to drink and all of these things. And of course, they were getting nursing care and oversight from a nurse practitioner, and lots of support and care and resources. And so we did this, and it was very highly successful. We tracked service use data and health outcomes, and everyone was really happy with it that was involved. And so we expanded that to, which is now a 9-bed managed alcohol program here in the city. And so that is an example of one of the ways that we've evolved our scattered site model to include this other stream of, I guess it'd be congregate managed alcohol. And so really, I think, going back to the idea that because the United Way is kept with us, and they've been confident in our funding and sort of let us have autonomy over how we're doing this, and they trust that we know what we're seeing, we're sort of doing research in motion, and we're continually refining. And because they've allowed us to do that, they've now got this infrastructure that we've built in the city, and really leading the way in harm reduction housing. Yeah.
That is so interesting. And I'm wondering, Jordan, like when you were seeing things that, you know, with the really challenging cases with people that were presenting really big challenges, and you realized, okay, we need to do something different. As a leader, as someone who's really involved and obviously passionate about this, is it disheartening, or do you view it as like, okay, like let's just reset and go down a different path? Like what do you feel as individually, like as a person? How do you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. Not disheartened at all. I think it's just, we have to come to terms with that as anybody that runs programming, is that we're not gonna do one thing and serve everybody's needs, and we can't stick so tightly to that. We have to build on what works and continually expand and evolve. You know, like one of the issues with the programs that we have now in Saskatoon is that they're designed either for the system, for the needs of the system, or for the needs of the program or the staffing. And we have to look at it in a different way. We have to say, you know, what are the actual needs of the people out there and what they want. And there, you know, when you look at homelessness, there are so many different reasons why someone's become homeless. So many. You can't just clump them all together. And so if there's 400 people that are homeless in the city, it may be that there are 359 different responses to that we have to come up with, you know. And so we have to think more loosely about that. When we're developing programs and when we're doing this work, it needs to be much more malleable and much more responsive. And even what works, you know, now might not work in 5 years or be as relevant. And we have to be okay with that and just look at the facts. Like, is it working? Are we getting outcomes? Are people staying housed? Or, you know, are we getting them into a unit and 2 weeks later they're out, but we checked the box that they were housed and it meets everybody's statistical criteria, and we move on, you know, sort of glazing over the fact that that person's back on the street and worse than ever, you know. So we have to look at those things and just be honest about it.
You really have to stay on your toes, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
Jordan, do you ever find this work daunting or overwhelming, or are you inspired? I think I know the answer to this, but like, do you ever have those days?
You know, I think what is daunting some days is it's more the systems and the struggle with trying to maintain funding and stuff like that than the work. The work is always so inspiring. The work is, how could it not be, right? Like, it's more the struggle with you work so hard to offer something and it's meeting need, and the data looks good, and everything looks good, and there's so much momentum that goes into that. And then in 6 months down the road, you're on the chopping block, with some department or another in terms of what they want to fund, and the criteria has changed or something, and so you're back to the drawing block about trying to somehow prove that what you've done is working, and all of that kind of stuff, I think, is what's more discouraging and more daunting, but not the work.
You love the work.
Yeah.
You've been very generous with your time. Before I let you go though, and sort of maybe building on that, I'm wondering if in whether it's the past few years or looking back on your career, is there a story, is there a person that stands out to you that you think in your mind that it worked out, the work we were doing was successful? Is there someone that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and I think the people that come to mind for me aren't the ones that are the sort of shining light stories where somebody goes from sort of rags to riches or whatever, where they were down in the dumps and now they're working and they're going to rider games and all this kind of stuff. Those, once in a while, those stories do come about, and they're wonderful. Trust me, I mean, when you see them, it's wonderful. But I'm much more of a guy for measuring the really small incremental wins that sometimes I think other people would look at me and say, how is that a win? But it's when you're confronted with the immensity of someone's trauma and what they've been through, and you know that the challenge here is it's life or death. It's really life or death. And what we might actually be doing in those times is helping the person have dignity in their last days, and to be comfortable and to do the best with what we can. And it's not going to be some stellar story where they get a job and they just get married after and all this kind of stuff. It's much more subtle than that, and those are the wins that those are closest to my heart, those ones.
This is episode 1, season 4 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson, and we are speaking with community leaders who are making a difference when it comes to safe and affordable housing. If you like what you've heard so far, feel free to give the podcast a 5-star review and share the episode with your friends. The final guest in this episode is someone who did not sleep a wink before our interview because of nerves, but I have to say, she did an amazing job. Her name is Chelsea Fulton. She is the Pride Home Manager for Out Saskatoon, and I love that she wears her heart on her sleeve. Pride Home is a house that provides 2S LGBTQ youth between the ages of 16 and 21 a safe place to live open and free lives here in Saskatoon. It opened 5 years ago, and it is serving an important role in the community. An Out Saskatoon survey showed that 30% of youth in its youth programs have been homeless or without secure housing at some point in their lives. Chelsea was kind enough to meet me at Out Saskatoon's offices and explained that she had been in the role since February of this year. You will quickly realize how much this job means to Chelsea, a job she calls a beautiful gift. I started our conversation by asking Chelsea why Pride Home was created back in 2017.
From my understanding, Pride Home was made because Out Saskatoon saw the need for the youth to have this home, a safe place. Queer youth and specifically Indigenous Two-Spirit youth are overrepresented in homelessness and foster systems, group homes, all of it. And they needed a safe space. So there was Rainbow Coffee, one of our youth support groups, and that Out Saskatoon has. They saw that youth were staying a little bit later and after, and it was always a discussion that was brought up. So I think that's where it all stemmed from, and it was one of the first in of its kind, right? Now we do have like Lulu's Lodge as well, but we definitely need more safe spaces for our our queer and sexually and gender diverse youth. And it's not just youth, it's also, older adults and that middle ground. Like there needs to be more safe spaces within housing and group homes and all of it.
I want to get into specifically in a minute in terms of what makes queer youth in Saskatoon kind of maybe more vulnerable where they would need a service like this. But can you, Chelsea, just take a little bit of time to explain like what are the services available at the home, and what is there that helps people so much?
For services, at Pride Home, we do a lot. We do a lot of hard work. I'm the Pride Home manager, and I do have a wonderful team that I work along beside. I do have 2 primary staff in the house, Sarah and Kiara. They are absolutely divine and great. And then I have 2 other casual staff that comes in like once or twice a week. Sunny and Megan, and they are absolutely amazing. And in terms of what we do at the house is like, what don't we do, right? We do have a lot of youth coming in. I have a wait list. We have a full house right now. We do a lot of peer support, a lot of navigating systems. But the main goal is, take that one barrier away from them that all queer youth have is, the homelessness are not a safe space to be themselves, or we're a space that they're not celebrated. So we give them that. With most of the things within Pride Home and with queer youth in general, it's all intersectional, and there's a lot of things. If you can take one of it away for safe housing, we can start working on some of the other issues that is needed in terms of support, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual.
That's so interesting, because I've found in doing this podcast for the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years now, especially when speaking with social workers, because I've been lucky to speak with several throughout the podcast, there are lots of challenges out there in our community that people are facing, and yet so much of it, at the core of it, is having a safe place to live and a safe place to call home. And I think that's something that so many of us take. I know for myself, I certainly take that for granted, and yet it's not realistic for a lot of people, is it?
And not at all. And it's tough. From my own experience too, it was hard to, someone that experienced homelessness and on the risk of experiencing homelessness, and as a youth and trying to figure out my own, I can empathize with them and know exactly where they're at. So in creating this and continuing on this safe space for our queer youth is it's just amazing, and seeing them flourish. I've been there since February, and some of my kids have, got jobs and are excelling within the realms that they needed to. It's amazing to watch. I always tell my sister, I'm a mother of 8. That's basically what I am, a mother of 8. Yeah.
And you enjoy that?
I do. I mean, it's teenagers, so it does have its times. It does have its times where, some days I'm oh, you know what, I'm going to bed. I can't do this. But, it's waking up every day and showing them that, that there is somebody there that's standing behind them, that's standing with them, willing to walk through all of those tough conversations, those tough emotions, and they're really inspiring, because some of them are going through puberty. Some of them are going through life-changing moments, and it's wild to me that they just they're so woke at that age. I didn't know half of the stuff that they do now. Every day, as much as I teach them, they teach me.
So what ages are so you mentioned you have a full house. How many is in a full house?
So Pride Home has 6 rooms in it. Each room has its own little suite, right? Because it's a supported independent living home. And then we also have a basement suite where it's, I hate saying this, but I like to say the next chapter of youth who kind of like, I hate this phrase, but age out, that still need a little bit more support can live there until they're ready to go on to the next venture. So yeah, I have 8 kids right now.
You mentioned that there's a wait list to get into the home. How does a person, become a resident of Pride Home?
Wait list. It's so sad. Yeah, I do have a wait list. I always have a wait list. It is very long. We do have like a process, like you have to fill out an application, get referrals, but it's all through the application process. I do go through them. I try to contact the youth that are on the wait list just to see if they still need housing. With us being fully housed right now, it's kind of a tough situation. But it's just, for me, it's, like I have people that are very, very high needs, some that are just needing some space, and it's hard to make those decisions. I have to make sure, because like in each application, it gives a little bio about like your situation, what is happening. And you have high needs, some that are medium and some that are low, and it's not easy decisions to make.
So when you and again, I know there's obviously privacy things here, Chelsea, but in terms of like when you say high needs and medium needs, like what do you mean by that?
So for me, for high needs, it's like someone who's homeless or at the risk of experiencing homelessness. Those are the highest needs, because I don't want any of the youth like outside or not being properly fed or not being like housed or being safe, because it is a scary place out there, right? And like medium or needs are, for me, is like if they do have a home for right now. So if it's emergency houses, emergency housing is what I have to like go basis off, and then housing. But I also like, with privacy reasons and like the story behind everything, like it's finding that balance and trying to make sure that it is fairly, each youth is fairly chosen.
Yeah. These are hard decisions.
Yes, we need more Pride homes. Yeah, it would definitely be nice to have more Pride homes, but we're doing the best that we can with what we have, and I think that having this home is changing a lot of lives for a lot of youth, and it is a long-term home, and it is a voluntary home. Like, it's not like you have to be here, so you come in voluntarily. Yeah, and it's just.
And because the people, they still have to pay rent, correct? And yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So rent is it's affordable. It's about, you have to pay your rent, and then you also have to, since it is like you have roommates in the house, you do have to pay a portion of the utilities. So rent's about $500, and then rent is like 1/6 of the utilities. But yeah, we do like programming and like groceries and stuff like that. We do like meal plans. Sometimes they don't work.
Can you tell me about some of the programming that you do?
Oh, programming. Let me tell you, sometimes it's a struggle. I also like to take a holistic approach to this. So like when I said at my practicum that I did bring the medicine wheel into it, with making sure that we are reaching every single realm to fulfill each of our beings, so mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. I like to do that within the house too. So like we do fun things, but we also like to try to do educational things, life skills.
Okay, so you're rolling your eyes a bit there. So is it hard, because like you said, they're teenagers, they're still growing up. Like, do you find that sometimes maybe different kids are more receptive than others, perhaps?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. 100%. And it's a lot different that we do live in a society that's very like digital, right? So like they do like to play a lot of games, and like there's different approaches that we've been trying. So programming can go from, we had to write it out. So like write your feelings, do poetry. We have art nights. We garden, but we need to like harvest the garden. We have like outings, like we go bowling or to the pool. We do a lot of beach days and hiking, like through the summer. A lot of art. All of my kids are very, very talented. So it's really nice. And game nights, and we try to make it like a familiar structure within the house, because like a lot of youth who go through some of the things that other youth haven't, have been robbed of that kind of support, or have been robbed of that familiar structure that we in the house call each other, the staff call each other aunties. So we're like, hey, like auntie blah blah, but we like try to make sure that we do supper every night. We try to get the youth to be involved with that. We do like family barbecues, and like we'll all get together and just cook and eat and laugh. So we try to bring some of that structure in there. So
I was just thinking of so many things as you were explaining that, in terms of I think perhaps in my mind too, before speaking with you, I maybe had this idealized version of what life was like in the home, but I think you paint a very realistic picture in terms of like it's not all sunshine and lollipops. Like it's hard work. But then I also got to thinking too, you were saying that the situations, the backgrounds these kids have been through in their lives, like that I feel sad when I hear that, because I would like to think that we're better than that in 2021, and yet there's still so many challenges on that front, isn't there, in terms of being a young queer youth in Saskatoon?
Oh, 100%. My youth still experience a lot of racism and homophobia and transphobia anytime that they go out, and it is sad. And like Pride Home, yes, it's happy. We have our, just like any other family structure, any other family, we have our hard days, our boring days, our happy days, and we do a lot of peer support, and it is a lot of talking, and it's tough for some of them sometimes, with having to navigate through coming to a new home, figuring out who you are, but then also having such support and love that they are not used to, or that it's kind of like it's foreign to them, right? Being celebrated and just having the space to be who they are, it's kind of shocking for some of them. And then sometimes leaving those spaces is a little shocking, a little hurtful as well too, because it's not always like that.
How do you know, Chelsea, that you're making a difference in these kids' lives? Like, how are there specific moments that you can think of where you've seen, okay, like I'm getting through to this person, or I see that us aunties are having an impact?
I see that all the time. I see it all the time, and in some of the ways that they joke around sometimes, when the progress that they make from when they start. I keep track of a lot of like situations, and the growth that they've done, and how they become independent is the ultimate goal, right? Like, yes, I can give you the tools and I can walk beside you, but like, can you make these decisions to do that? And like seeking out extra support when needed, going to school, getting a job, being able to like sit down with them and have conversations about past traumas or memories, and like getting past that comfort zone. Because let me tell you, when I first came in here, they were not very like, hey, how's it going, blah blah. Like, it took me a couple months to like actually like sit down and joke around with them and have conversations, and you know, I
What was that like for you those first few months when they weren't as, hey, Chelsea, how's it going?
You know, I was very nervous to do this, and like, as probably a lot of people are, but this is like my 40%, and usually I'm very outgoing and like to talk. So like I knew that going in the house, that I had to bring that down too. So like I would match a lot of their energies, and I'd be like, hey, like how's it going? Like how's school? Blah blah. And then until I got to like sit there, and I would work like more of the night, so I can actually like sit there and talk with them and like get to know them a little bit. So it was a challenge. I was trying to find that balance of, you know, like I'm still the Pride Home manager, but like also like who are you? And yeah, like let's make this connection. It was nice though. It was definitely a lot of wins when one of the tougher youth, I would like, for me, I would always be like, okay, like I would go say goodnight before I left, and I'd be like, good night, I love you. And they wouldn't say it back for a while, and I'm like, that's okay. And then when they started saying back, I'm like, yes!
This has been episode 1, season 4 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. I host, produce, and edit this local independent podcast. My thanks to Chelsea Fulton, Jordan Mills, and Priscilla Johnstone for being such wonderful guests on the podcast. It really was great meeting and learning from each of you. I also want to thank Sherry Benson for her help in making this episode possible. You can follow and listen to YXE Underground on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the podcast if you like what you heard. You can find YXE Underground on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, which is where you'll see some lovely photos of Chelsea, Jordan, and Priscilla taken by local photographer and wonderful human being, Molly Shakowski. Thank you so much for your help in this episode, Molly. I also want to thank Danger Dynamite for their help with the website, and my cousin Andrew Dixon for creating the theme music for the podcast. Before I go, I would like to acknowledge that these interviews were done on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. YXE Underground is a production of the Salthammer Production Company. My name is Eric Anderson. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon, Saskatoon.